Yeah, thank you so much, Umabati, for your nice introduction. So, I'm Dr. Sepuri Krishnamohan, endocrinologist, Karnool. So, today we are going to talk about dapagliflozin in depth. I'm transforming into a cardiologist today. So now I am going to talk about the cardiovascular aspects as per this the dapagliflozin in the heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. That is, I am going to talk about this particular DAPA HF. So all three are mixed, dear my friends. Very good evening, my professional colleagues and the technical team at the back end and the front field workers of this particular meeting. So we are going to talk about this particular dapagliflozin, which belongs to this SGLT2 inhibitor class per se, the sodium glucose co-transporter 2 inhibitor, and it has got a lot of evidence in the form of the cardiovascular outcome trials. Like to start with, it is declared TIMI 58, and then came this DAPA HF, and then came the DAPA CKD last year actually. The DAPA CKD, the study was excellent actually. The DAPA CKD was so excellent that the study was supposed to end by the end of November 2020, but the US FDA was so happy to see the results and it asked the AstraZeneca people. Actually, this molecule belongs to the AstraZeneca by the brand name Foxiga, which is available in 5 and 10 milligram dose. So US FDA was so happy to ask the people to stop this trial all of a sudden in the month of March itself, that is 6 months prior to its scheduled time, seeing the overwhelming response of dapagliflozin with regards to the renal outcomes. So it has got lot of evidence, the robust evidence from declared TIMI 58 and DAPA HF and this particular the DAPA CKD also. And I would like to just briefly talk about the molecule first. So this particular molecule is a glucose lowering agent to start with actually in way back in 2013 2014 in the United States of America. It started as a glucose lowering agent. All these drugs, the empagliflozin and the dapagliflozin and the canagliflozin are the gliflozins which are available. They are called SGLT2 inhibitors or the gliflozins. See, as of now, we have got only three gliflozins in our country, the DAPA, CANA and the EMPA. And we have some more gliflozins in the US and in the West. That is the A2 gliflozin from Merck, which is not available in our country. And these drugs emerged as anti-diabetic drugs. So everybody thought this is one wonderful drug that has joined the armamentarium of the anti-diabetic medication. And later on it evolved as a anti-cardiac drug actually. So with regards to the 3-point MACE, with regards to the hospitalization for heart failure and the incidence of strokes and all. So the cardiologists started claiming that it is our product. And after the DAPA CKD results rolled out, the benefits on the kidney and the nephrologists started saying it is our molecule because it is having lot of benefits with regards to the kidney. So it emerged as a anti-diabetic drug like glucose lowering agent. It does not only lower the blood sugar level, it lowers the systolic blood pressure significantly and to some extent the diastolic blood pressure. Whether it is the 24-hour blood pressure or the daytime blood pressure or the nocturnal blood pressure per se, because the importance is the nocturnal hypertension is the very dangerous the cause for this particular the myocardial infarction or the stroke at the danger hours like 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. So the resistant hypertension also responded well to this particular SGLT2 inhibitor, the dapagliflozin. So apart from that, it started reducing the weight of that particular individual to a tune of 3 to 5 kilos in a span of 3 to 5 months. So these are the cardinal features of this particular, apart from the glucose lowering, apart from the blood sugar and blood pressure lowering, it reduced the weight significantly so that there is metabolic control. And after that, the role of the dapagliflozin, particularly the heart failure actually, or the hospitalization for heart failure, and then the cardiovascular is over, then comes the cardio-renal continuum, that is the kidney aspect, the improved EGFR after the usage of dapagliflozin. And one more which is not mentioned in this probably the slides is the effect of this gliflozin, either the dapagliflozin or the empagliflozin on the liver, because it has got a very favorable effect on the liver disease in the form of if you start early in the course of the disease of NAFLD and NASH, that is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and the non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, it is going to reduce the fat deposition, and also it's going to prevent the progression of this particular NASH to the scarring stage, that is either the cirrhotic stage, which is reversible actually, which is irreversible actually. Once the scarring starts, there is no medicine for its reversal. The cirrhosis is the dead end disease of this particular liver. It's a chronic liver disease characterized by the irreversible fibrosis and the scarring, and which later on leads to the hepatocellular carcinoma. So the stages are the NAFLD and the NASH, and the pre-cirrhotic stage and the cirrhotic stage, and the hepatocellular carcinoma. If you start this particular the dapagliflozin early in the course of this particular disease, the type 2 diabetes, where we find this NAFLD as a very common finding in the ultrasound abdomen, and then you can go for this the fibroscan to know the elasticity and all, which is done in the day-to-day OP procedures by any medical gastroenterologist. And if you start this, not alone dapagliflozin, along with the metformin, along with the pioglitazone, along with the statins, along with this fibrates, along with this the saroglitazar, along with this the vitamin E actually, vitamin E 400 mg BD. See, with all these multi-pronged approach, you can prevent this particular the progression of the NAFLD to NASH to cirrhosis actually. So today with this introduction, I think it's better if I get into the topic, because the time given for me is 30 minutes, and my lecture will be followed by ma'am's lecture, which will be for again a period of 25 to 30 minutes. I request all the participants to type their queries or questions, put that in the chat box, so that I'll be able to take the question and answer session at the end of the 2 sessions. So today's topic is dapagliflozin in heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. And thanks to Reddy Labs for giving me this opportunity to be a speaker of this particular evening. I'm very happy. They had written protect heart and protect kidneys. They also have to add the protect liver also, because for type 2 diabetes mellitus patients, it protects heart and kidneys as well as the glycemic part. In terms of HbA1c, if I want to tell you, the dapagliflozin reduces to a tune of 1% to 1.5% of the glycated hemoglobin, that is the HbA1c, which is very significant. So it's an add-on drug. It's an add-on drug to any molecule. You can add it to metformin, you can add it to sulfonylurea, you can add it to alpha glucosidase inhibitor, you can add it to this particular thiazolidine and the pioglitazone, you can add it to the the GLP-1 receptor agonist, or you can add it to the DPP-4 inhibitors. You can add it to insulins. So any other drug in the field of in the armamentarium of this particular the anti-diabetic medication, what we have, either the oral drugs or the injectable insulins or the GLP-1 receptor agonists, we can add this particular dapagliflozin to any molecule because it doesn't have any sort of drug interactions. Moreover, it has got very synergistic effects with the GLP-1 receptor agonists and all. As per the latest guidelines, we have to start this particular dapagliflozin or the empagliflozin very early in the course of type 2 diabetes, because once you start it late, you might not be able to initiate this particular dapagliflozin because of the low EGFR, which is commonly seen in the type 2 diabetes patients with the chronic kidney disease. So if you want to enjoy the fruits in the long term, in case of type 2 diabetes, you have to start it very early in the disease course. So the brand name of this particular dapagliflozin from Reddy Labs is Daplo. It is available in the form of 5 and 10. I have got extensive experience with this particular molecule dapagliflozin, the Reddy Labs. It is, I can say that I can endorse this particular molecule actually, because so far I have never, in the last 5,000 webinar speaker programs, I have never endorsed any product to my colleagues. But I can so confidently endorse this particular, the quality dapagliflozin from Reddy Labs, the Daplo, to my colleagues, because I have enough experience with the original molecule, that is Foxiga from the AstraZeneca and the Oxra from the Sun Pharma. These are the original mother molecules, and it is comparable to that of the original molecules. The Daplo stands at par with either this particular the Foxiga or the Oxra, the original mother molecules of dapagliflozin. So with that, I just get into the content. The heart failure in India, the scenario we see is the prevalence is about the prevalence is about 1%, that is in 8 to 10 million, and the mortality attributable to heart failure is around 1.6 million individuals per year, with post-admission mortality of 20% to 30%, and the medication adherence ranges from 25 to 50%, and devices like the ICD, that is implantable cardiac device, and the CRT, that is cardiac resynchronization therapy, and the CRDT, that is the cardiac resynchronization therapy device, and the LVAD, that is left ventricular assist device, are available in India, but not with a good resources. They are not being utilized for all the patients. It is reserved for the richest of the rich people. That's so. These are the latest modalities. Apart from the drugs, the implants are available. The cardiac resynchronization therapy device is available, but not everybody can afford to go for that. And the heart transplantation is gradually picking up in numbers all over the country, and the epidemiological data on heart failure from developing country are the very limited. Sorry for the technical glitch. And most common cause of heart failure in India, the common ones are the ischemic heart disease, or the coronary artery disease, and the rheumatic heart disease. And apart from that, I would like to mention the commonest causes for this heart failure are diabetes, because 50% of the patients who are suffering from this heart failure, inevitably they have diabetes, and 90% of the patients who have this heart failure have the underlying the atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, per se the coronary artery disease or the myocardial infarction. And the most common thing we have to keep in mind after diabetes, hypertension, and dyslipidemia, we have to keep all the time the myopathies, cardiomyopathies, either the dilated cardiomyopathy or the ischemic cardiomyopathy. Apart from that, the commonest cause we find in a country like India is the simple anemia, that is microcytic hypochromic iron deficiency anemia. That is the commonest cause that causes the heart failure. I am adding the points which are not mentioned in this slide, please. And this slide shows us the therapeutic dilemma what we have in heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. At the balance, on one side we see the RAS inhibitors, that is the AC inhibitors or the ARBs, that is the angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors or the angiotensin receptor blockers. And one point I would like to highlight, the take home message for all is never combine an AC inhibitor with ARBs, because it is very detrimental. It becomes like that leads to fulminant kidney failure by resulting into a state of hyperkalemia. So never combine. You use it. You use either AC inhibitor or ARB, but never combine the both. And the aldosterone blockers, that is the MRAs, that is either the mineralocorticoid receptor antagonists, the examples like the spironolactone and the eplerenone. And the guideline recommendations we find from the American College of Cardiology Foundation, bar American Heart Association, and also the HFSA, that is Heart Failure Society of America, and the KDIGO, that is the Kidney Disease Improving the Global Outcomes. So these are all the guidelines. They recommend the usage of this particular the treatment modalities in the cases of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. And we find the proven outcome benefits in the heart failure, and strong evidence of benefit in diabetic nephropathy as well. We discussed actually. And for your kind information, there is no term called diabetic nephropathy from 2016 onwards, as per the American Diabetes Association, which dictates the terms as far as diabetes is concerned. From 2016 onwards, the diabetic nephropathy is being replaced with a term called the diabetic kidney disease. So on the other hand of the balance, you find the potential risks of RAS inhibitor therapy. You all are well aware the side effects of this particular ACE inhibitors and the ARBs, and the risk of the increased potassium is the deadliest. The risk of this particular ACE inhibitors are this particular ARBs, and the risk of increased potassium in the form of hyperkalemia. And now the guidelines for hyperkalemia have been revised internationally in the year 2019. Earlier the cutoff was 5.5 millimoles. Now it is defined as mild hyperkalemia is defined as 5 to 5.5 millimoles of potassium, and 5.5 to 6 is moderate hyperkalemia, and anything above 6 is severe hyperkalemia. And utilization limited by the risk of hyperkalemia, and up to 75% of the patients with heart failure are suboptimally dosed, because we cannot start with the full dose in patients suffering from heart failure. So we need to calculate the dose and go slowly and methodically and systematically by escalating the dose. And not all can do that, only the experts can do that. So the treatment algorithm of this particular the heart failure with reduced ejection fraction contains either the ACE inhibitors or the ARBs and the beta blockers and the SGLT2 inhibitors and the ARNI, that is combination of sacubitril and the valsartan. ARNI is nothing but angiotensin receptor and neprilysin inhibitors. And the last one is the MRAs, that is the spironolactone and the eplerenone. And the pillars of HRF therapy, that is heart failure with reduced ejection fraction therapy, you find the A is for ACE inhibitors or ARB, never both again and again. And N is the neprilysin inhibitors, that is the sacubitril. And the B is beta blockers. And M is for MRAs, that is mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist, that is the spironolactone and the eplerenone. And S stands for SGLT2 inhibitors. And out of all these things, the greatest advantage what this particular SGLT2 inhibitors, especially the dapagliflozin or the empagliflozin, they score over the other drugs. All these ACE inhibitors, ARBs, neprilysin inhibition, beta blocker and the MRAs, the SGLT2 inhibitors, now the international guidelines from the American College of Cardiology or the American Heart Association or from the European Society of Cardiology, the European Society of Hypertension, the British Society of Cardiology, the Canadian Society of Cardiology, all have incorporated SGLT2 inhibitors in the treatment algorithm of this particular heart failure with either the preserved ejection fraction or the heart failure with the reduced ejection fraction. So the easiest part of SGLT2 is you don't need to titrate the dose. You just start SGLT2 inhibitor, start and just watch, that's all. The game begins and it goes on like this. With this, otherwise you need to escalate the dose of either up titration or down titration is required with all the other medications. That's what I mentioned. Whereas this particular SGLT2 inhibitors, if you start with 10 milligram of dapagliflozin, it's enough that you don't need to either down titrate or up titrate. That is sufficient. That will take care of the various studies mentioned. They confirm all this particular the Victoria and the Galactic HF and the affirm acute heart failure and all. They confirm this the particular the usage of all these the pillars, 5 pillars of this particular therapy for heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. And the adding therapies is adding life. That is, you can see in this the 24-month mortality. You can see the number of therapies, that is versus 0 or 1 therapy. It is 2 therapies, 3 therapies, 4 therapies, 5, 6 or 7 therapies for heart failure. And you can see on the right hand side the odds ratio with the p value, which is very significant on all this versus 0 or 1 therapy. You find all the 2 therapies, 3 therapies, 4, 5, 6 therapies for heart failure is statistically very significant. The drugs which I have mentioned. And this is the treatment algorithm for guideline directed medical therapy, including the novel therapies. So it starts from the heart failure with reduced ejection fraction stage 3 treatment. That starts with that's what I told, ARNI, that is angiotensin receptor and neprilysin inhibitor, bar angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, bar the angiotensin receptor blockers. And out of all these, ARNI is preferred. ARNI is a combination of the sacubitril and the ARB valsartan. So with different doses it is there. And it is the role of the cardiologist to initiate ARNI in this particular situation. And then it is divided into 5 parts actually. The first part is For patients with an estimated glomerular filtration of around or more than 30 ml per minute per 1.73 meter square of body surface, or creatinine around or less than 2.5 milligram per deciliter in males, or around or less than 2 milligram per deciliter in females, or the potassium around or less than 5 milliequivalents per liter, according to the New York Heart Association. NYHA is nothing but it classifies. It's a gold standard classification we have from this New York Heart Association, from 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, 1 is the beginning stage and the 4 is the dead end stage of heart failure. And then the first category I am talking about, you can add the aldosterone antagonists, that's what MRAs, like you can add the spironolactone or the eplerenone. Coming to the second category, the patients meeting an EGFR criteria or the NYHA class 2 to 4, you have to add a SGLT2 inhibitor. And the category 3 for patients with persistent volume overload, that is the NYHA classification 2 to 4, you have to titrate with diuretics. And for persistently symptomatic black people, despite the ARNI, the beta blocker and the aldosterone antagonist and the SGLT2 inhibitor from NYHA class 3 to 4, you have to add hydralazine plus isosorbide dinitrate. And for the patients with resting heart rate around or more than 70, on maximally tolerated beta blocker dose in the sinus rhythm, or the NYHA class 2 to 3, you have to add evaporadine. Evaporadine is a drug that is used in the cases of heart failure, and it has got the specific characteristic feature of reducing the heart rate, where beta blockers, even the maximum dose of beta blockers will fail to reduce the heart rate beyond the 70 beats per minute. You have to add inevitably the evaporadine either in the dose of 2.5 milligram or 5 milligram OD or the BD, depending upon the situation. And now we find the SGLT2 inhibitors and the fuel energetics. On the left hand side, you can find what usually happens in the heart of a type 2 diabetes mellitus patient. There is increased fat oxidation, there is decreased glucose oxidation, and the decreased cardiac work efficiency, which leads to decreased myocardial contractility, and which leads to the increased incidence of progression of heart failure. And with the SGLT2 treatment, this is prior to SGLT2 treatment. With SGLT2 treatment, that leads to the decreased fat oxidation and the increased glucose oxidation, the increased BHOB oxidation, and the increased the P bar O ratio, and the increased cardiac work efficiency, which in turn results in increased myocardial contractility, which in turn leads to the reduced incidence and progression of heart failure. And the heart in heart failure is energy deprived actually. Ketones serve as the super fuel to the heart and have beneficial effects in heart failure. But the question is the utilization of the ketone bodies by the body is a questionable, debatable topic. SGLT2 inhibitors, they always increase the ketone body utilization, and it is not agreed by all the international authorities because of the contradictory evidence to that ketones may be harmful to the body. That's the reason why I always in my speaker programs I always keep saying don't go for this bloody keto diet. Don't advise your patients on a keto diet. That's what. And this is a slide. This is an important slide which shows the SGLT2 and the branched chain amino acids, the BCAA. So this is the left hand side. You can see the mitochondria. The same mitochondria is seen on the right hand side also. And the pathological stresses, the mechanical overload or the ischemic injury that leads to the reduced catabolic activity of the branched chain amino acids in the mitochondria, which results in the increase of ETC, that is electron transport chain, and which results in the ROS formation, that is reactive oxygen species, and that increases the mTOR, that is the mammalian target of the rapamycin, which again in turn leads to the cardiac hypertrophy and the cardiac dysfunction. Whereas coming to the picture on the right hand side, with intervention with empagliflozin along with the standard of care, if it is used, the mitochondria, we find the picture is just reversed. That is, you find the increased activity of the catabolic activity of the branched chain amino acids, which counter regulates this particular electron transfer chain and the beta chain keto acids, and it blocks the ROS, that is the reactive oxygen species, and it blocks the mTOR, that is the mammalian target of the rapamycin, which thereby leads to the progression of cardiac hypertrophy and the cardiac dysfunction. And branched chain amino acids get accumulated in heart failure. SGLT2 inhibitors, they increase the branched chain amino acid utilization. This prevents and reserves the cardiac hypertrophy and dysfunction. I think it's very clear to you. And coming to the main important the pathophysiology, the diabetes and heart failure. How diabetes is correlated with heart failure? Why the incidence is so high that majority of the diabetes patients, they do develop heart failure, and retrospectively the vice versa, the heart failure patients, you take 100 cases of heart failure, and if you the screen all the patients, you find more than 50% of the patients have got diabetes. So like when you have diabetes, you look for hypertension. When you have hypertension, vice versa, you look for diabetes. Like you have AIDS, you look for the pulmonary tuberculosis. Either the cases of pulmonary tuberculosis, you retrospectively go and check for this particular the presence or absence of AIDS. So the mechanism you find on the left hand side, the increased norepinephrine or the noradrenaline, the increased angiotensin, increased aldosterone and increased neprilysin, increased adipokines, they result in the increased NHE1 in heart and vasculature. NHE is nothing but the sodium and the proton exchangers, that is N stands for sodium, H stands for the proton, that is hydrogen. The NHE1 which is present in the heart and vasculature. To start with, NHE is a new terminology for us actually, because it is the NHE1 when it was traced out by the scientists, it was found only in the mammalians actually, NHE, and they thought it is only one, but later on it is proved to be that there is NHE 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 exchangers actually. The sodium proton exchangers are 10 in number, that is there are serial 1 to 10. That is the NHE1 is very important because it is present in the heart and the vasculature, and the NHE3 is very important which is present in kidney. So this increase of this particular norepinephrine and angiotensin and the aldosterone and the neprilysin and the adipokines that will increase the NHE1 in the heart and the vasculature, and that increases the NHE3 in the kidneys, in turn releases leads to the cardiac hypertrophy, injury and the fibrosis, and leads to renal sodium retention, and that leads to the progression of heart failure on the one hand, and on the other hand the increased NHE1 and NHE3 they result in impaired insulin sensitivity, which leads to the worsening of glycemia, leading to the dysglycemia, and on the other hand it has been associated with the incidence of microvascular and the macrovascular complications, and that put together that leads to the progression of diabetes. So likewise on the right hand side you can see that the heart failure, you find the increased NHE1 in the heart, which leads to the cardiac injury, and you find on the other hand the heart failure produces the increased NHE3 in the kidneys, which leads to the sodium retention. In turn it is related with this increase in the cardiac wall stress. So they are all interrelated. I hope everything is clear. And type 2 diabetes is strongly and independently associated with the incident of cardiovascular ischemic events and hospitalization for heart failure. Among the patients with previous myocardial infarction, those with type 2 diabetes mellitus make up a higher risk group. High residual risk even with contemporary standard of care. In addition, patients with previous myocardial infarction have a higher risk of incident heart failure and subsequent lower survival rate in the long term. And preventing the hospitalization for heart failure in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus remains an unmet clinical need. And coming to the DAPA-HF trial, the eligibility criteria around the inclusion criteria actually around or more than 18 years of the age were recruited actually, and the diagnosis of symptomatic heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, and as per the New York Heart Association, the heart failure class 2 to 4 were included, where the left ventricular ejection fraction is around or less than 40%. That is the definition of the heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, and elevated NT and pro BNP around or more than 600 picograms per ml, or around or more than 400 picograms per ml if hospitalized for heart failure within the past 12 months, and an estimated glomerular filtration of around or more than 30 ml per minute per 1.73 meter square, and the study median follow-up was 18.2 months actually. It's more than 1.5 years actually, and the subjects were 4,000.
Recording in progress.
The subjects taken were 4,744, and in 2,373 patients. ఇది నీ నెట్వర్క్ ఇష్యూరా నేనా దా ఒకసారి వస్తా ఉంది ఇప్పుడు నేను ఎక్కడ క్లిక్ చేయలేదు, ఇది తీసేయండి, టేక్ ఇట్ ఆఫ్. Am I audible? Am I audible, please? Technical team.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? Yeah, thank you, Garima, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're audible.
Yeah.
No.
And in 2,373 patients, dapagliflozin 10 mg was added to the standard of care, and another 2,371 cases, placebo was the plus the standard of care. And insights from the DAPA HF, the risk of cardiovascular death or heart hospitalization for heart failure. You can see the left hand side, you can see the placebo and you can see the graphs. The red is with the dapagliflozin and the placebo, and you can see the curves.
Slides are not
Slides are not visible.
visible. Slides are not visible.
Yeah, 1 second, just 1 second. Slides are not visible. Yeah. Take it off.
You are visible. Slides are not visible.
Yeah. Thank you for your feedback. Okay. This cover it. Yeah, are the slides visible, Garima?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Visible?
Right.
Thank you so much. Okay. So, on the left hand side, you can find a graph. You can see the curves getting separated even from the beginning of this particular the first month itself. You can see the curves getting clearly separated, showing the 26% reduced the relative risk reduction, that is with 4.9% of absolute risk reduction. The components of the primary composite endpoint, the cardiovascular death or the hospitalization for the heart failure, you find the 18% relative risk reduction with 1.9% reduction in the absolute risk reduction, and in the hospitalization with heart failure, you find the 30% relative risk reduction, where the p-value is it is less than like 0.0001, which says it is statistically very significant, with a reduction of absolute reduction of 3.7% in both the cases. It is statistically very significant. And the insights from DAPA HF, the risk of cardiovascular death or the heart failure, the hospitalization for the heart failure. And the left hand side, you can see the curves getting separated from the beginning. Even on the right hand side, you can see that with a reduction of 27% relative reduction and reduction of the absolute reduction of 4.5%. And the right hand side, you can find the hospitalization for heart failure. The left hand side is for the risk of cardiovascular death, and the right hand side refers to the hospitalization for heart failure. It is relative risk reduction is by 25%, with absolute risk reduction by 5.5%, which are very statistically significant. And the insights from DAPA heart failure study, the subset analysis, the heart failure duration, age and the systolic blood pressure. And on the left hand side you find the circulation, the heart failure. It says patient characteristics and clinical outcomes and the effect of dapagliflozin in relation to duration of heart failure. Is it ever too late to start a new therapy? The benefits of dapagliflozin were consistent across the heart failure duration in DAPA-HF. And when it comes to the American Heart Association and the circulation, it says the efficacy, it's an original research article, the insights from DAPA-HF, the efficacy and safety of dapagliflozin in heart failure with reduced ejection fraction according to the age. The benefits of dapagliflozin were seen across the whole spectrum of age in DAPA-HF. And the last one being the European Society of Cardiology, the clinical research, the heart failure and the cardiomyopathy says the effect of the dapagliflozin according to baseline systolic blood pressure in the dapagliflozin and the prevention of adverse outcomes in heart failure trial, that is DAPA-HF. The benefits of dapagliflozin were consistent across the range of systolic blood pressure in DAPA-HF. So these are the endpoints actually. The primary composite endpoints are the hospitalization or an urgent visit for heart failure, hospitalization for heart failure, urgent heart failure visit or the cardiovascular death. And the secondary endpoints are the cardiovascular death or the heart failure for hospitalization, or the total number of hospitalizations for the heart failure and cardiovascular deaths, and the change in the KCCQ total symptom score, and worsening of renal function in the form of percentage, and the death from any cause in the form of percentage. And you can compare this with this the dapagliflozin figures with the placebo, and all the times and the primary composite outcome, the p-value you take, it is 0.001, that is statistically very significant. And the secondary outcomes, when you take it, the cardiovascular deaths and hospitalization for heart failure, the p-value is same, the 0.001, and the same thing holds good for number of hospitalization for heart failure and the cardiovascular deaths, and the everything is statistically very significant. This is more of the statistical data. And time to clinical benefit of dapagliflozin and significance of prior heart failure hospitalization in patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. And the primary efficacy outcomes in the first 100 days. And you can see in this the graph, you find the worsening of heart failure or the cardiovascular death in the first 100 days. When you see this the graph, you find at the day 28 itself the curve is getting flattened actually. That is, you can see the benefits of the dapagliflozin in the first 100 days. It starts at the first month itself, that is day 28 itself, is with the hazard ratio of 0.51 and with the confidence interval of 95%, and the p-value is 0.03, which is statistically significant. I don't say it is very very significant, but it is statistically significant definitely. So now coming to the effect of dapagliflozin on heart failure and mortality in type 2 diabetes mellitus patients with reduced ejection fraction, sub-analysis from the declared TIMI 58 trial. And the primary efficacy outcomes in the first 100 days, and the left hand side you can see the at baseline among 17,160 type 2 diabetes patients, the heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, the number was 671, that is 3.9%, and the heart failure without no reduced ejection fraction, it is 1316, that is 7.7%, and patients with no history of heart failure, the number was largest, that is 15,170, that is 88.4%, and concluding that in India somewhere around some 50% of the patients with chronic heart failure have diabetes. I've been telling this from the beginning. See, all the time, the patient suffering from heart failure, you screen them, more than 50% will have diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And on the left hand side, the right hand side, you can see the differentiating figures, that is heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, and that is the ejection fraction around less than 45% with history of heart failure. And again on the right hand side you find the heart failure without reduced ejection fraction. The difference here is the blue one is the heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, and the brown one is the heart failure without reduced ejection fraction. And if you see the incidence, the cardiovascular death or the hospitalization for heart failure is reduced by 38% in HRF group, that is a number needed to treat for 4 patient years is 11, and the cardiovascular death is reduced by 45% and the number needed to treat is 19, and the hospitalization for heart failure is reduced by 36%, and all cause mortality is reduced by 41%, and the number needed to treat is 16 patient years. Always remember, this is 11 patient years, that is 19 patient years, and this is 16 patient years. And coming to the heart failure without reduced ejection fraction, the cardiovascular death or the hospitalization for the heart failure is reduced by 12%, and it is cardiovascular death is almost neutral. There is no change in the cardiovascular death in the subset of patients with heart failure without reduced ejection fraction, and the hospitalization for heart failure is reduced by 24%, and it does not influence the all cause mortality in cases of without the reduced ejection fraction heart failure, that is with preserved ejection fraction. So the series we see this the Kaplan-Meier curves stratified by the different heart failure categories for cardiovascular death or the hospitalization for the heart failure. These are all the busy slides actually. The HRF versus the placebo, that is dapagliflozin versus the placebo, and the greater relative risk reduction is seen in the patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, that is the 38% with dapagliflozin versus 12% placebo, and the hazard ratio with reduced ejection fraction is 0.62, and hazard ratio without the reduced ejection fraction is 0.88, and the p value is 0.46, which is statistically significant. And again the same Kaplan-Meier curve stratified by different HF categories for the hospitalization for heart failure. You find the same figures, the lower risk of hospitalization for heart failure with or without the reduced ejection fraction, that is the dapagliflozin versus the placebo, the 36% versus the 24%, and the heart rate, the hazard ratio with the reduced ejection fraction is 0.64, and the heart rate without reduced ejection fraction is 0.76, and the p value is 0.45. It is not statistically significant. And the same thing, the reduced cardiovascular deaths seen with the reduced ejection fraction is 45%, and the p value is 0.012, that is statistically significant. And now the cardiovascular outcomes by the heart failure category. You can see this particular curve. You can see in the center the ones which are moving to the left side are, that is the favoring the dapagliflozin. The ones that are moving the line to the right hand side, that favors the placebo. So dapagliflozin is beneficial in type 2 diabetes mellitus patients, including those with reduced ejection fraction, that is HRF. And the take home message, coming to the last part of my talk, the cardioprotective benefits of the dapagliflozin extend beyond people with diabetes, and that makes I have to give you the take home message. The dapagliflozin is the first of its kind, the molecule being approved by the US FDA to be used in cases of heart failure or for hospitalization for heart failure, even in the absence of diabetes. That is, non-diabetics also can use this particular dapagliflozin if they have this reduced ejection fraction, where the patients have the heart failure. Even in the absence of diabetes, the dapagliflozin can be used. This is for the first time. This is being approved by US FDA. There is already one more drug I have to tell my colleagues. The liraglutide, the GLP-1 receptor agonist, liraglutide, what we use generally in the clinical practice for lowering the blood glucose levels and lowering the weight. That was the molecule with the brand name of Victoza, and that was the first molecule based on the leader trial. The take home message is that based on the results of the leader trial, seeing the cardiovascular benefits and the reduction of weight, the US FDA has approved this particular liraglutide for the usage of the anti-obesity like drug in patients without diabetes with a different brand name, that is Saxenda, to differentiate between the patients with diabetes and patients with no diabetes. For patients with diabetes, it is Victoza. For patients without diabetes, liraglutide is available, but not in our country. In the United States and the Canada and the western part of the world, it is available as Saxenda with a higher dose actually. And the SGLT2, one of the pillars of the management of the heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, because it is very easy to initiate. You initiate 10 milligram of this particular dapagliflozin, or you initiate the 10 milligram of empagliflozin or the 25 milligram of empagliflozin, and that is called start and stay therapy. That is, you don't need to down titrate or up titrate the dosage of this particular SGLT2 inhibitors. And the very good part of this particular SGLT2 inhibitors, whether the dapagliflozin or the empagliflozin, the particular is they can be started in any stage of the heart failure. Let it be in the beginning, after the ACE inhibitors, or the ARBs, never both, after the beta blockers, after the RNA, after the MRA. At any point of time, you can just start this particular dapagliflozin. And dapagliflozin is very beneficial among the patients with symptomatic heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, and reduction in the recurrent heart failures, even events plus involvements, improvements in the symptoms. Sorry, and the cost is very much reduced for the patients with the introduction of dapagliflozin, because it reduces the hospitalization for heart failure, which minimizes the cost for the patients a lot. It's a big loss for the hospital ICUs, the cardiac ICUs, but still it's very beneficial for the patients. And benefits, they are consistent across the age spectrum. We have seen the baseline diuretic is, we have seen the baseline use of RNA, we have seen, and in diabetes and non-diabetics, across the range of baseline health status and baseline medication use. And with that, I conclude my session. But before concluding the session, I would like to highlight some of the side effects of this particular group SGLT2 inhibitors. One has to be every clinician who is treating diabetes, either the primary care physician or the diabetologist or the physician or the endocrinologist, whoever is treating this particular diabetes, they have to be well familiar with these side effects, because when you are using any drug, you must be quite familiar with the side effects also. you have to counsel the patient with regards to the increased incidence of genitourinary infections with this particular the SGLT2 inhibitors, either the dapagliflozin or the empagliflozin or the canagliflozin. So ask them to maintain genitourinary hygiene first of all, to reduce the UTIs or the candidial infections. And there are some case reports which have shown to be very deleterious. The dead end part of this genitourinary infections being the Fournier's gangrene, that is the necrotizing fasciitis of the perineum. The 19 cases have been reported to US FDA. The patients who have been on this particular the dapagliflozin or the canagliflozin or the empagliflozin. So you have to advise the patient to maintain the genitourinary hygiene and ask them to use soap or the cleansing agents after the going to the washroom and all, and after having the sex with the spouse. And second thing is always the mechanism of action is by osmotic diuresis. The SGLT2 mechanism is that excretes glucose through urine to the tune of 80 to 120 grams a day. It depends that intrapersonal variation is there, interpersonal variation is there. Roughly around 80 grams to 100 grams of glucose is that enhances the glycosuria, and that becomes the main pathophysiology behind the genitourinary infections. Wherever there is the glucose laden tissue, you find an infection. So obviously the glucose is being excreted through urine after the initiation of these SGLT2 inhibitors. So ask the patients to be cautious with that. And the weight reduction is because of the excretion of this glucose, that is the excretion of this glucose, that is glycosuria, to a tune of 100 grams glucose in urine every day, that makes the patient lose 3 to 5 kilos of weight. And the mechanism is like osmotic diuresis and the natriuresis, both are there, but whenever there is the diuretic like action like osmotic diuresis, you always tend to get into a complication of dehydration. So all the time dehydration predisposes to euglycemic DKA, which is characteristic of this particular SGLT2 inhibitors. We know the term diabetic ketoacidosis, but euglycemic DKA is the patient will be running a blood sugar of 140 or 150, still the patient will be in DKA. So that is the point where you have to stress upon that patient to get adequately, you have to counsel the patient to get adequately hydrated with fluids, buttermilk, or say any other fluid like the barley juice or the ragi juice, whatever it may be. Advise the patient to get adequately hydrated, and one has to be very cautious. The treating clinician must be very cautious with these complications of this particular SGLT2 inhibitors. With that, I just take leave of you, and thank you so much for patient listening. Now I hand over my dais to Ma'am Dr. Sipuri Tirumala Devi. Will be talking about the endocrine and diabetes aspects of the dapagliflozin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for